So thank you so much for taking out time from your such busy schedule for this interview. I was really excited for this interview to have a very insightful discussion with you, especially learning about the monumental work that Education Cannot Wait is doing in emergency and crisis settings. And your leadership particularly is very, very motivating for me. It's incredibly inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So to begin with, I would just start with, I'd love to hear your personal perspective. What inspired your journey into education in emergency and then leading Education Cannot Wait?
Well, I mean, I think it's bigger than that, because I'm a human rights lawyer by training. So the question is, that's where my inspiration started. I was inspired to alleviate suffering and serve humanity. And I have done many different things being with the UN for about 35 years, from justice, protection, gender, peacekeeping. And education is, of course, one of the most foundational and important human rights that we have.
Absolutely.
So for me, the transition from one human right to another is always inspiring, because the more human rights I can cover, the better. But education in particular, because if you don't have education, you don't have freedom of thinking, freedom of expression.
Yeah.
You may not be able to protect your right to due process. You may not have a livelihood, so you don't have right to a job, right to education, right to housing,
Yes.
freedom of expression, voting rights. So education is actually, it's more, to me personally, it's more the culmination of a career always supporting human rights. And now I have been supporting the very foundational rights with utmost passion, because I can see that is the kind of right from where all other rights spring.
Yes. And the if it's missing, then all the other rights won't really take place, because it's so foundational
You can't.
in its essence.
If you can't read and write, if you don't have critical thinking,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to claim your other rights. And I always say that if you really want to control a people or a nation or a region, the best, most efficient way of doing that is to making sure that nobody gets an education. It can be used as a weapon of
Yes.
totalitarianism.
That's true. It can be weaponized very easily into aggression.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a common way of weaponizing for dictators and totalitarians, is to make sure that people don't get educated. Then you hold them like this, they can't do anything.
Very true. So now we'll just flow seamlessly into the interview. So as you just mentioned about the critical importance of SDG 4, quality education, do you think in humanitarian contexts, in emergency settings, we can actively reimagine the education systems to dismantle systemic inequalities that perpetuate cycles of inequality, poverty, and marginalization? The education system as a whole.
I mean, I think when you're in a humanitarian, in humanitarian contexts, it's extremely difficult, and I think even naive, to think that while children are being subjected to crimes against humanity and genocide and raped and parents killed and villages put to burn, I find it almost naive to start thinking, how do we reform the education system? Because that's not the priority at that moment. The whole system is burning. So we don't focus on systems the first thing we do. What we focus on is to ensure that education brings quality, and that means learning outcomes. It's not that he has walked around with a school bag, but they actually learn and come out with knowledge that leads to a degree. And that you can do in a humanitarian setting. As a matter of fact, you have to, because most humanitarian settings or crisis are protracted.
Yes.
Afghanistan is a very good example. It's been a protracted crisis since the late 70s.
Yes.
DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo,
Yeah.
has been in a protracted crisis since the 50s or 60s. So,
Yes.
and the average for a refugee, the average, and I think that would be almost the minimum level, is 17 years. So if they have to sit and wait for an education until there's peace and they can return home, you're losing a whole generation.
Yeah.
Because by the time the war is over, they have already gotten, went off on child marriage and have 5 children, and there's no, that
Yeah,
generation is
that
lost.
critical period of a child building up, the development stage is gone. It's past
I mean, the
till
most
then.
important years for a child, psychologically, are from, I mean, not, it's important when you're in the womb as well, but it's from 0 to 18. These are your most formative years.
Yeah.
That develops your character, your ability to think, your training. And if you haven't gotten that by 18, it's going to be very hard to accelerate and try to make up for that lost time, especially if you are from a war-torn country with many priorities. If you're from the global south, the financial resources will not be available. Yeah, so you're lost. You're losing a generation. And right now, we have 234 million children and adolescents who do not access a quality education as a result of armed conflict, refuge, and climate disasters. That's almost a quarter of a billion.
Yeah.
And if we don't make education in emergencies and crisis a priority now and reverse that trend, in a few years we'll have a billion. We
Yeah.
may have 1/8 or 1/9 of the world population that experienced traumatizing, and trauma, by the way, is not a good condition for learning, so that has to be dealt with too.
Absolutely.
Having no food and school meal is also going to hold back learning. Not feeling protected, not having access to sanitation, especially for girls who menstruate, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
So it's not just education academically, it's so many factors that creates a holistic education that matches the needs of a child, and especially the needs of a child suffering severe trauma from war or refuge.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two is that we call education cannot wait is precisely that, yeah, water and tents are very important, but as long as you're only focusing on water and tents, you are not empowering these people to one day overcome their challenges, rebuilding their countries, bounce back. You're just creating more aid dependency.
Yes.
I'm not saying they don't need water, food, and tents. They need that. But in parallel, education is just as life-saving.
Yeah.
But it depends how you look at the word. There is a famous pyramid made by a psychiatrist called Abraham Maslow.
Maslow's hierarchy of
Yeah.
needs.
And if you go to the basic of the pyramid, it's water, food,
Yeah.
and then you move up till you get to the top of enlightenment or self-realization.
Yes.
Now, if you're going to focus on that little base all the time for billions of people, they will never become self-realized. They will never become strong to manage by themselves.
They won't be able to
So
climb
you
up the
need to
ladder.
move beyond. You need to move beyond the base. The base is needed, but the base is not exclusive or exhaustive.
So you were talking about the transformative power of education and how it's important to empower people not just to fulfill their basic needs. How does ECW integrate peace building and social cohesion elements into its education programs to foster stable and sustainable societies in the crisis settings?
Yeah. Now you're using a lot of buzzwords: sustainable, coherence, peace building. These are very abstract words for
Yeah.
children who are running for their lives from burning villages or who are subjected to genocide or crimes against humanity because that's not on top of their head.
Yeah.
And I think it's also a little bit putting the cart before the horse because there can be no peace building until you enter a phase of low intensity or conflict, very, very low intensity, or a cessation of hostilities and ceasefire. You can't build peace in the middle of a genocide or in the middle of, an active war. It's very difficult to build peace. That's a different phase. Coherence and social coherence. It's not just something you read in books about. It's something that is part of your social emotional intelligence and the formation, both from parents and caretakers to schools, but also the environment in which you live. Coherence requires harmony.
Yeah.
And if there is chaos, we can put a little label and say we have a little subject matter on the agenda called social coherence, but the reality outside is totally incoherent.
Yes.
Totally incoherent, and there is absolute disharmony. So you're putting a lot of expectations on that child. Adults also have a responsibility to create conducive environments for social coherence. So with education, what you can prevent is young adolescent boys from picking up arms and joining militia groups, terror groups, armed groups.
Yeah.
So that will contribute eventually to some form of social coherence. You will protect girls from getting subjected to child marriage, rape, not only by outsiders, but rape by their husbands.
By the households, within the household as well.
Pardon?
I'm saying within the household as well, in conflict
Absolutely.
zones.
Absolutely. And actually it increases in conflict because when men are demasculated because they can't protect their families, they're going to go home and take it out on their wife and their children. We see that all over. So domestic abuse always increases in a conflict, especially if the men are rendered unable to protect their families. The sadness is that they then become a danger to the family.
Yes. So I was about to ask you a question which you've already answered. So I'll ask you the latter part of it. So the question initially was that why should education be on top of the humanitarian funding agenda? So you've just answered that.
I've answered that.
Yeah, you've
I've
answered
answered
that.
that.
So
I mean, if you don't think that education belongs in conflict, I will say you do not know that 99% of conflicts are protracted. So you need to read up about the concept of protracted conflicts.
Yeah.
You means that you don't know what a humanitarian context looks like. So when you think that education is not a priority, you need some education because reality is so different from the logical assumption that it's not a priority.
Yeah.
Reality is only education can save us in the long term in a sustainable way.
So the latter part of it was that what are some of the steps that the international community and movements and organizations take to ensure that education in crisis and emergency settings receive consistent priority, consistent attention?
Okay, if I look at the larger scheme of things, the average amount invested in the war machinery every year globally is $2.3 trillion. Okay, so these are decisions taken by political leaders.
Yeah.
sometimes in a democratic manner because that's what the voters wanted, sometimes in a very unilateral and non-democratic manner because they decided that since I am in charge, I decide what to do with the military. Sometimes you have a good reason to be concerned about invasions, and obviously you want to strengthen your ability to protect your countries. Sometimes you have a situation of the herd influencing everyone, that we live in a world of danger and we're going to be attacked and we need to have a strong army. And even if we are not being attacked, we need to go into proxy wars to
Yes.
support our allies.
Yeah.
And even if that is destroying our nation, we are willing to do so. There's no reason on earth to use the resources in the world to invest 2.3 trillion a year in the war machinery, and I'd say less than half a billion in crisis and emergencies and protracted crisis. I mean, you can just see the dramatic difference in priority setting,
Yes.
which then leads us to the next question: are you capable of being a leader? Because one requirement for a good leader is to be able to quickly spot the priorities.
Yes.
And the second requirement, or probably the first, you are a leader, politician, whatever, because you're here to serve others, your
Public
constituency.
has invested
You're
their
here to
trust
serve
in you.
humanity. Let me finish. You're here to serve humanity.
Yeah.
Now, if that is not your priority, then you need to maybe go back and learn more about democracy, about why the UN was created, maybe read up on the UN Charter, maybe read up on international law, because I think a lot of the problem stems from the fact that there is a lot of either willful ignorance or just naive ignorance of an international world order that was created in 1945. So that's the best way we can help children in crisis to get an education, is to look at our broader global priorities and how we relate to all of that. And the second is that when you use taxpayers' money, ODA, you make sure that as much as I'm going to invest in water and food and tents as life-saving, I'm intelligent to realize that education is an immediate need that will create sustainable long-term results and rewards. So it requires an ability to connect the dots to the future. The investments I make today will bring profitable results in the future. If everything is short-sighted, you have a tunnel vision and you only want to do today, then don't invest in education, because education is while it gives an immediate protection and is life-saving, it also needs an ability to have a vision for what it should look like.
Okay, so the
Okay.
other, I got your answer. So the other question is that what are some of the operational and particularly security challenges that ECW faces in delivering education in highly volatile environments? And how do you, or the vision in general, addresses these challenges and issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think that let's turn it around. What is the biggest threat to education in crisis? When armies bomb schools, when you bomb and destroy the education system and literally bomb the schools into ashes, and when you spend more money on bullets than on teachers, you're creating an enormous security risk to the people that you were meant to serve, humanity, to your own people, your citizens, and to the children, because the bullets are destroying what we are trying to build. The bombs are destroying what we are claiming to want to help and protect. So I think getting the priorities right, that is the broader security issue. Right now, priorities are only, and we have seen that if you look over decades, have only created a more insecure world. I was in the UN in the 90s when the Cold War ended, and we were more hopeful that the world was moving towards more security than we are today. This is probably among the worst of times. Physically, to operate in an armed conflict, genocide, crimes against humanity, and so forth, is that, first of all, the UN is the best placed and civil society to respond in dangerous situations. The first responder to a crisis is always the United Nations. It's not the World Bank.
Yes.
It's not IMF. It's the United Nations.
Yes.
So the UN has a security system in place, practices, rules and regulations that allows us to operate in dangerous areas without being reckless. That's why we have security provisions for that. Many organizations wouldn't even allow you to step foot in that country.
Yes.
So that's why the UN is by far the best, and that's why ACW has been able to operate in those countries because we are hosted by the United Nations.
Yes.
The other security challenge is the day-to-day. You go to a country, either you can't access is always the big issue. You can't access because of the extremely dangerous situations. Like we cannot go to Gaza today and start setting up schools. Besides the fact that the schools might be bombed, we might also be killed. So meanwhile, the civilian children and adolescents are being killed, which also feels like a very morally strong dilemma, you say.
Yes.
But you could also bring it to a situation like Central African Republic, where you have many militia groups. You have to learn to negotiate access with them. If you don't know how to diplomatically maneuver warring parties, armed civilians, even militaries who don't respect humanitarian law, you have to be able to maneuver how you negotiate access with them. And I say that because I've been serving in many wars, and it forces you to learn how to speak to a war criminal or a soldier or a militia at a checkpoint in order to pass the checkpoint without being killed or having any of the children or beneficiaries killed. But these are the dangers. Other dangers are mines. Mines, take maybe generations to remove. This is one of the deadliest weapons.
Yes.
They will remain for decades, and you can easily put a population, children at risk. I've seen many children stepping on mines, losing their legs and limbs or dying. You have a war economy, meaning that kidnapping, rapes, trafficking increases.
Yes. Violence
Which requires strong protection measures because it's related to gender-based violence, can be either way, girls or boys. But you have trafficking that is making money in a war situations. Soldiers need girls and you sell them, or armed groups, or you try to make, there are no longer any legitimate ways of making money because everything has been destroyed, or livelihood. So desperate people do desperate things, and they enter into the war machinery or the war economy. There's always a risk that the children you serve can be killed on the way to school. And there is a risk that you can be killed. I mean, the security is everything from global insecurity to individual insecurity. The most at risk are the people we serve, the ones that are being directly targeted, because targeting of civilians is not a new phenomenon. It started, it was not an issue during the First World War, but it started in the Second World War, and it's only grown rapidly since.
Yes.
In the old days, two armies fought far away from civilians. There were civilian casualties, and they were probably targeted at times. But since Second World War onwards, and certainly today, civilians have become the very target.
Yes.
Because if you target the civilians, the women, for instance, if you rape the women, you are, and it's a war tactic, you are destroying the social cohesion of that society. If you kill the children, rape, it's a war tactic to destroy the morale and the social cohesion, besides getting rid of people that stand in their way. Yeah, insecurity is everywhere.
So we were talking about you just mentioned about this dramatic shifts in aids and the funds going into the war machine and how it's strengthening militias and all of that. So how does ECW position itself amidst these topsy-turvy development and humanitarian aid landscapes to ensure that it delivers on its mandate?
Because everything boils down to the people you recruit. When you set up an organization, which I was privileged to do, together with Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister of the UK, was the founder of ECW, and I've set up teams before that. The people you recruit will determine the success of the organization. This is not to say that I never made a mistake. I certainly learned from my mistakes. But the team we have today in Education Cannot Wait is a carefully assembled team that is highly experienced in humanitarian contexts, highly experienced in education in crisis, and also have developed an attitude of calculated risks, but also a willingness to take risks to serve others. You need go-getters. You need people who think big. You need people who have strong, not just intellectual IQ, but also social skills for negotiations.
And emotional intelligence, I believe.
Emotional skills, so that you can relate to the people you serve, which is called empathy. If you don't have empathy, this kind of work is not a good choice. So yeah, and Steve Jobs, when he created Apple, and I read a lot, I learned a lot from him. But that's also been one of his advice, is that success comes from the people you recruit. And I've given you some of the requirements that have guided our recruitment to build this absolutely top-notch team that led to the creation of one of the most, I don't want to say the most because there are others, but at least one of the most successful initiatives that I personally, and I might be wrong, I'm just speaking my experience, have seen since I joined the UN 35 years ago. Why? Because in a very few short years, we mobilized $1.6 billion to the trust fund. We realigned coordinated in-country funding towards our joint programs, which strengthen coordination and collaboration, an additional $2 billion. and we were only 30 staff at headquarters or in the total organization. And we reached, with this money that we mobilized, with such a small overhead. As a matter of fact, we have the lowest overhead in the entire education sector, operational overhead cost, because 99.9% or whatever, no, well, 7% goes to operational costs, but the bulk of the money goes to the children and education and adolescents. So we haven't built a big empire in headquarters. We are focused on, nor have we tried to build mini ECWs in different countries with our own offices.
Yes.
We have decided that all UN agencies, civil society, ministries of education, private sector, strategic donor partners, they're all our colleagues. They are our offices. They are our partners, but they're our colleagues. So by empowering our colleagues in UNHCR, UNICEF, UNESCO, Save the Children, Norwegian Refugee Council, Plan International, and you can name it, over 30% of local organizations, which already exceeds what they call the ground bargain of 25%, and the ministers of education, and you engage your strategic donor partners from day one, you become a catalyst that brings the funding required, the visibility required for our colleagues that work for these agencies, governments, donors, civil society, UN entities to do their job. It's a whole new, different way of thinking.
Yeah.
But it's a thinking of, we are not here to compete over human
We're
suffering.
here to serve.
We have to serve, and we are doing this collectively, together. I don't care whether you are called UNHCR or WFP or Save the Children or Plan International. You are all part of the ECW family. As far as we are concerned, when we raise resources, then it's absolutely natural that each agency and organization have their own identity. We are UNHCR, we are focused on refugees. We are this organization, we are that organization. Yes, that's every human being need to have their own identity in order to contribute to the larger good and the bigger collective identity of humanity. So I'm not in any way questioning that. But ECW wasn't created like this and will not become like this. Often when you create a new initiative, and I've been in some of them, not leading them, but when I was more junior, it's created just to coordinate and facilitate. 10 years later, it's become a giant machinery with offices all over. It was never meant to be like that. And with, thousands of staff at headquarters, it was never meant to be like that. And we went the opposite direction. We were not here to build an empire. We were here to draw on the great capacities that already exist in civil society, among governments, in the United Nations system, and have the blessing and the privilege of being a catalyst to bring resources to them, because they are so busy operating in very difficult circumstances. So the least we can do for them is to try to bring money for them. And because they are so busy living in these situations and working, we are also here to help tell their story to the world.
This perspective is very unique. This view of people who are working towards the same mission, looking at them as a family rather than competitors, it's incredibly unique and motivating and just very inspiring to just wrap my brain around. Because usually, even if people are working
it
towards,
takes a lot of
it takes a lot. Yes,
yeah,
it takes a lot to take yourself off the table and see the table as holistic. That's a very refreshing perspective.
I mean, I think a lot of that is, but it takes a lot of spiritual work. You have to get rid of that ego.
Yes.
You know, service is not about promotions and who is the boss and I have a bigger office than yours. And no, this is not service. Service is when you self-transcend yourself, your organization with our identity, and you are just grateful to be a catalyst to help others. That's the excitement and reward that you get out of it, is that you're serving others, be it children, be it sister UN agencies, be it civil society, be it donors, be it governments, Ministry of Education. Then you realize, like many great thinkers say, that service is actually the happiest, most rewarding experience you can have.
Yes.
But it
That's true.
requires from you to transcend your ego.
That's true. So you were just talking about your mission and the mission of all of the people, organizations, movements who are working towards, education in crises and emergency. So I'd like to know some of the concrete evidences, examples of ECW's work in emergency where it has made on the ground tangible difference in any of the crisis regions, conflict regions.
I think we made a tangible difference in all 45 countries where we have made investments. And I think the evidence to that is our annual reports, because they are, and I am very proud of my team for that, especially the team that collects all the information and analyze it very professionally. But I do think our reporting, showing the evidence, and I'm a lawyer, so for me, evidence is very important.
Yes.
Show success stories in different scales and magnitudes in the midst of the darkest corners of the world. And that entails 44 countries. Examples. We are today, through partners on the ground, able to deliver, not to the extent that we want to, but every life matters, through our investments, education to girls in 6th grade and above, challenging a very unhealthy, very not religious or spiritual ban that girls cannot go to school above grade 6. So that's happening as we speak. Very proud of that. And the work done by colleagues on the ground. But that's a very good,
It is indeed.
Yeah. And
Thinking of
most
a
of all,
ban and then
most of all, I'm proud of the girls that keep doing this. Um, in northeast Nigeria, we worked with Dr. Mukegwa's organization that he created in Eastern DRC, human agencies, the government. They have a very strong education ministry at all levels to provide education, including the top of the notch mental health and psychosocial service, besides academic and all else and protection to girls and boys who had been kidnapped by Boko Haram, a terrorist group in northeast Nigeria and other parts of that part of Africa. And in ways that I thought impossible, turn them from victimized girls who once were raped, losing all their sense of self-worth, and to meet these queens that they have become today, thanks to the services provided by our partners through our investment. And I'm telling you, when I was there last year, it's not only that they have healed from the trauma, it's not only that they are functional in a society, they move like queens, as if they own the world. And they are mentoring other young girls to become the queens of the world.
that's
And
true
that's
transformation right there.
That's powerful. So these are just a few examples. I mean, if you look at our annual report on our website, you will find find thousands of them. But I'm just giving you a couple of examples.
But the
We
example
made
that you just shared is
different,
incredible. It is indeed incredible. To not just transform a
yeah, but that's
person,
what we
but
do
to
everywhere.
also
I mean,
to
when Gaza, this happened in October 2 years ago, and everyone was afraid of supporting the children, except the agencies on the ground, the children and adolescents. We were the first to come in with our partners, and we invested in mental health and psychosocial services to civil society, international, working with solid national civil society and UN agencies to provide mental health and psychosocial services to a deeply traumatized society of children and adolescents. And I can say that today, 100% of them are traumatized. But we were the first to come in when everyone else that was leading countries and very important and politicians and speaking in the General Assembly didn't have the moral courage to do so. We did it. 1 or 2 months later, the sort of herd instinct set in, and they all together mustered the courage to do the same. But they needed everyone to agree and feel comfortable in it. Whereas we, a little tiny entity in the UN, with no political power or political interest at all whatsoever, as we are humanitarians, we did it, whether they liked it or not. Because if you don't think that we should deliver mental health and psychosocial services to children who have lost their legs and the arms and the limbs and the brothers, we are not going to listen to you because you have no credibility to tell us what to do. We will follow our human instinct, our humanitarian imperative of humanity, impartiality, and neutrality. So that's how we operate in ECW. We fear nobody except our own conscience.
That's the right attitude to have, not just at work but in life also. That's very powerful.
Now I have another call in 4 minutes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Just the
But
last
have
question.
you got enough for a good, last question? And
Yeah,
I need
just the last
like
question.
1 minute so I can go to the restroom
Sure, sure.
because I've been rushing since I woke
Sure,
up.
sure. I can take a
So
pause
last
here.
question. I'll give you a short answer,
All
and
right. So
it's
the
been
last
absolutely
question,
a pleasure working. Yeah.
yeah, the last question is just about your overarching vision for ECW and what are some of the key strategic milestones that you're aiming to achieve in the coming years? That's it.
Well, I will end with one sentence. My my vision, my dream, and my hope is that the 234 million children and adolescents today who cannot access a quality education finally gets to enjoy their inherent right to a quality education, not in 10 years, not in 1 week, but now. And if you can't do it now, do it this year. And the deficit of nearly 250 million children who cannot access a quality education. That means shift your $2.3 trillion to more bullets and bombs towards more books and positive, constructive support to the future and younger generation. So that's my hope and dream. And if ECW can be at everyone's service to ensure that there's coordinated, results-driven, clean order assurance, joint programming, coordinated, bringing everyone together to maximize the impact. I think these are my 3 dreams.
Thank you so much for
And
that
visions.
resounding. That
Dreams,
was a
it's not
resounding
just a dream,
message.
it's a vision. It's a vision, yeah. And
That's
an
a
expectation,
resounding
you know.
message and dream and a vision. It's been an absolute honor having this conversation with you. Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much,
Thank
Angel.
you so
Okay?
much. And
Thank you.
this
Thank
this
you.
interview will be in print and as well as on the YouTube channel, and I shall share the link with you. Thank you so much, and have a good day.
Lovely, Angel. And when you, I need to run now, but when you have it ready, can you make sure that my staff gets copies? Ken
Absolutely.
Page, I
Absolutely.
think people are copied because I don't take care of that. They take care of it. And the moment they get it, they're going to amplify it through all our channels around the globe. So just let them know, okay?
Absolutely. I'll do that. Thank
Thanks
you
a
so
million. It
much.
was wonderful speaking with you. And I'm
Likewise.
super sorry, but it's very stressful right now
No
because
worries.
I'm traveling
Likewise.
tomorrow. We are going through big restructuring.